Okay, today we're going to talk about image trace. What that means is that we're going to take images that are made up of pixels. So we talked about how in Illustrator all of our images are made up of vectors, which means that they're made up of points and paths. And we want to take our pixel images and we want to turn them into vector images so that we can manipulate them, use them for whatever. In this situation, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking a hand drawing. So if you don't have one already, if you have an image from a sketchbook or something just like a doodle, you can use that. If you don't, it would be a good idea to pause your video, take an image now, or sorry, make an image now, and then we're going to have to get it onto our computer somehow. So that can be, you can scan your page and bring it in digitally that way. You can take a picture of it with your cell phone and bring it in. We're not super concerned about the resolution for this because we're going to be turning it into a vector, and when it's a vector that means that it's infinitely scalable. So it doesn't really matter if it's 72 or 300 or 150. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to place an image that I drew into this document. So I'm going to go to File, Place, and it's this narwhal image. It's the JPEG. So again, we're not super concerned about the file type either. When I place this in, it's going to come in a little kind of thumbnail version on my cursor. If I click once, it's going to come in at full size. If I click and drag, it'll be whatever size I make it. So this just happens to be 8.5 by 11. Now you'll notice a couple things. One, my image, I use an app on my phone. So those of you that have iPhones, you can actually use your Notes app, and that gives you the ability to kind of scan documents, and it gives you this very crisp black and white image. So even if you kind of drew it in pencil, which I suggest if you're drawing it in pencil to go over it in pen so that you kind of have this darker contrast. But even if you did go over it just in pencil, scanning it in that way will kind of give you that contrast. But anyway, you can see here, I actually drew this on a spiral bound, and my tail kind of went into that spiral bound a little bit. And so I got this like little dotted line situation going on. But I also have this X on here, and this is telling me that I have a pixel image that I've placed into Illustrator. This also means that it's not embedded, it's just linked, okay? So a linked file means that that file exists outside of this document, and this image, if we were to close this document and open it up on another computer, this image wouldn't be linked anymore. It wouldn't be here unless we also took that file with us to whatever computer we were transferring our Illustrator file to. So there is a button up here on your control panel. If you don't see your control panel up here, it's under Window and Control, and there's this little embed button. You can also find that in your properties panel, and this is only when this image is selected. You'll see that embed. You can embed this if you want. It's not necessary for this thing that we're going to do with the image trace, but you can do it. So you can click embed. That will get rid of that X. That means now it's part of this Illustrator file. What we do want to do with this is we're going to image trace it. What that means is there's a button up here that says image trace. There's also one on your properties panel that says image trace, and we also have an entire panel that you're going to open up now. Go to Window and go down to where it says image trace, and this panel gives us all these different settings that are available to us, okay? So we can also hit trace here. So any one of those options is fine. You're going to hit one of them. You're going to hit OK. And what's going to happen, now this might be more obvious or less obvious on your particular drawing, but it's going to give you kind of like a preview of what this vector or what this graphic will look like as a vector. So it might increase your contrast, it might change your line work a little bit, depending on the settings. Right now, you'll just have the default setting on. And so depending on your image and what your image looks like will determine kind of what this preview looks like. But I want you to go to where it says preset on your image trace panel, and you're going to see all these other options. So let's say you were to bring in an actual full color photograph. Some of the options here that might be better for that are high fidelity photo or low fidelity photo, 3 colors, 6 colors, 16 colors. So if any of you are familiar with screen printing or something like that, where you kind of want to separate colors, these 3 colors or 6 colors for a full color photograph would really work out for you. For this, we're just kind of doing a line drawing, so you could try something like sketch art or silhouettes. I find that default actually works best for line drawings like that, especially when I have done it in pen. Something that is going to be important here, though, is like depending on how dark your pen was or how thick your line work was, this threshold, as we move this slider, if I move it to the right, what's going to happen is it's going to pick up more of my line work. It's going to make my line work a little bit thicker. So I can go really extreme with this, and you can see it getting thicker, okay? And the other option is I can go less. So let's say your line work is really thick. As I go to less of a threshold, you'll see that it's picking up less of my line work, and there's kind of some breaks in my line here. Now, obviously, it's important that we have decided like what our aesthetic's going to be. Maybe you want it to kind of look like half drawn. In this situation, I don't want to go too far. I do want to be able to color this in, and in order to color it, I want all of my lines to connect. But you'll notice here I'm starting to kind of lose some of the line work in my eye, so I'm going to just back off a little bit and see if I can't get a little bit of everything that I want. I also want this to kind of connect. I don't like that little white bit right there. But we also have this option. If we go to our advanced, you'll see there's a little section down here that says ignore white. Right now, if I were to turn this into a vector right now, each one of these white pieces would be a shape, and each one of these black pieces would be a shape. If I click on ignore white, what would happen is that the white areas would not become shapes. It doesn't really matter whether I choose this or not for this particular exercise. We're kind of experimenting, so if you'd like to kind of try it out, see the difference, you can click on that ignore white. So when I'm happy with my preview and the way it looks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit expand, and that expand option again is either on your control bar or your properties panel, or you can go to where it says object and expand. Any one of those options, you just have to make sure that you expand it. What happens is if I select this with my white arrow, you will see all the dots and lines, the paths that create my narwhal here. So I'm going to just zoom in a little bit, and if I click with my white arrow, what I can do is I can actually select all of these little areas that I did not want, and I can get rid of those. So I'm selecting them and hitting delete on my keyboard. So if you have sections like that where maybe you had a shadow or something, you can get rid of it. And because these are all points and paths now, you'll notice that I have this little stray line here. I'm going to take my pen tool and I'm going to subtract these points. Now remember, subtracting means that it maintains the connection of that path. But it gets rid of the point. So what I want to do here is just kind of modify my line a little bit, but without making that into an open path. The same thing here, I could actually get rid of that one maybe, and even that one, and then I could go to my curvature tool and I could take this and just kind of like modify that line right there, make it a little bit nicer of a curve, and get it exactly the way that I want it. I'm going to also go over here, get rid of all these guys, because that's one of those lines from the get rid of that guy too. Okay, so now this is a lot more of what I want it to look like. I might get rid of this little blip too. I can just delete that. There we go. That's nice and smooth. I can get rid of this too. I don't want to get too crazy about modifying this because I could be here forever. And I also don't want it to look too perfect. I still want it to look hand drawn. So So now I've got those little pieces that were kind of bothering me. Now we're going to talk about coloring it in. Oh, actually, I've got that little white area that I said I wanted to get rid of too. So I can zoom in on that. I can just kind of select it with my white arrow. And I'm just selecting the path and then boom, delete. All right. So now, oh, this is going to drive me crazy. I'm going to get rid of these two. But now once I kind of get my guy the way I want him to look, then what I want to do is I want to color it. So I'm guessing that most of you had kind of some experience with the program Paint, which is kind of like a drawing program that a lot of little kids use. And that program has like a paint bucket that allows you to kind of just like fill areas with color. And that's what we want to do with our live or image trace as well. So the way that we do that, I'm going to close this image trace panel. I'm going to just select my narwhal with the black arrow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Object and Live Paint and Make. And so what this does is you're not going to notice any changes to your actual image, but what you will notice is your bounding box has like these kind of fancier little circles here. Or sorry, they're not circles, they're definitely squares. And so that tells us that we have this as a live paint. Now in order to kind of fill in these different shape areas with color, you need to use the paint bucket tool, which you'll find this under the dead snowman or the shape builder tool. Live paint bucket, letter K on your keyboard for the key command. And then basically as I roll over these different shapes, you'll see them like highlighting with red. Now I'm gonna go ahead and change my fill color. So I kind of want this guy to be a little bit in the blue realm, but like a little bit gray. So like this color, I'm gonna hit OK and I'm gonna fill it in. Now, what you may or may not have noticed is that this is black and white. My scan was actually, because it was like a PDF scan, it was a black and white file. So in order to change that, so let's say, just for an example to show you an extreme, let's say I wanted to make my narwhal red. If I click on this, see how it's a gray, black and white tone. So in order to get out of the black and white color space, I have to go to where it says color, go to this little fly down menu at the top right here, and I'm going to go to CMYK. Now when I click, it's that red color that I had selected. So I'm going to go back to my bluish gray, a little bit more blue, maybe a little bit darker, like this, yeah. And I'm going to click on that. And now, this is actually, I had a setting on here that happened before. So let me just change it, because what the default is that with your live paint, you have this default for these small gaps. And so what would happen here is if I tried to fill this, it either wouldn't let me, or it would also fill in the entire background because this is not connected. Okay, so it's sort of like when we try and fill an open path, that's not going to work. So there's a couple ways to fix this. I'm going to show you two. One is that you can go to Object, Live Paint, and go to Gap Options, and then you can change this paint stops at small gaps is the default, but you can go to where it says large gaps and have that selected, and you hit OK, and that usually will solve the problem. So you'll notice that it actually kind of draws a line there connecting that. But I actually want to like physically connect this line because I want it visually to be connected as well as just with the paint. So the way that we do that when we're working with an image trace, because if I select this line, it's not line work, it's actually a shape. So what we want to work with is the Blob Tool, which instead of creating a line, it actually creates a shape. So when I paint with the Blob Tool and then I select it with the white arrow, you can see that the path is along the outside. And just to show you contrast, I'm going to show you what the brush tool looks like. If I kind of paint the same, almost the same shape with the brush tool, and then I select that with either the black or the white arrow, you can see that this is a path. Okay, so the paintbrush paints a path and the blob tool paints a shape. So because this line work is actually a shape, we want to use the blob tool. So there's a couple steps that we need to take. First, we have to make sure that nothing's selected. So we go to select, and then we make sure that deselect isn't available, because if it is, that means something's selected. Then we want to make sure that our fill is black. So we can actually we want to make sure our stroke is black. So we just make sure that that is black, and now we've got the right thing. So I'm gonna hit Command Z again there, and then you'll notice, like, I don't want this big blob here. That isn't right. I want the brush size to match the size that I kind of used to draw this. So in order to change the size of your brush when you're working with either the blob tool or even the brush tool, you can use the brackets. So next to the letter P, you can see down here at the bottom of my screen, it shows you what key I'm pressing. So if I hit the left bracket, it makes my brush smaller, and the right bracket makes it larger. So I want to make it about the same size as the line work that I have here. And then overlapping, I'm just going to draw in what I want it to look like. So I'm not really happy with that. I'm going to make my brush like a little bit bigger, like a little too big. I can also change the size here. Just going to say size. I'm just going to make it 6 points. Whoa, too big. So just so you know, I went into the properties panel, and it says brush here, and I just double clicked on this to change the size. Oh, that's too big. All right, this is just going to have to do. So I'm clicking and dragging and drawing that line that I want to add. All right, now, thing is this is not connected to this, right? So in order to make that happen, I select both of these, and I go to where it says object, and then I go down to live paint, and I say merge. And what that does is it puts it and makes it part of the live paint. So now when I go to, actually I want this color here, so I'm just gonna take my eyedropper, which is right here. It's also, you can hit the Alt or Option key to access it, and then I'm going to fill that in as the same, but also now my tail is completed over there. And then maybe I will make I'm going to choose a color for my horn. I want it to be kind of like a gold color. Oh, whoops. And I got a little trigger happy there. And then I'm just going to find each one of these little shapes and just click on them, and that will dump it with color. So again, I'm using the live paint bucket, which is under the dead snowman or the shape builder tool, whichever preference you prefer. And then I can even create like an image for the background or color for the background. Object, arrange, send to back. I think I'm gonna make it like an orange color, like a burnt orange color. Yeah, and I might even think about putting some kind of pattern over that. So I'm just gonna look at what my pattern options are. I'm going to go to swatches. I'm going to go down here to patterns, basic graphics, textures, something cool here. I feel like I like this one, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to change the color. So I think I'm going to change it to like a cream kind of color. So we'll bring yellow up and just kind of choose like this, but like a little bit warmer. Yep. And then I'm gonna save a copy, and okay, and then I hit cancel. All right, so I'm gonna fill that with that color. Ooh, I want my orange back though. I should have made that a swatch before I went through all this pattern options. Oh shoot, I like lost my pattern. Is it there? Oh. Okay, so it would help if I was on my fill instead of my stroke. All right, so I'm gonna go to my appearance panel because I want to put a secondary fill on here. I'm gonna have to find that orange color again. Womp womp. That's what I get for like, I'm never gonna be able to find that same color. I really liked it. Okay, and I have to make sure that my solid color is behind my pattern. Boom. That's that. All right, so I've got my narwhal with my cool pattern behind it. All right, so this is how you can kind of complete a something from hand. Like, so this gives you a lot of options because it means that basically anything that you create by hand, you can turn into a vector. You can also do it with images. So maybe I'll just kind of show you really quick on the side here. This is all that you need to do for your exercise. But if you do feel like taking it kind of like a step further and trying out an image, you can try that on like another, you know, in another document or in the same document. Let's see, do I even have anything good? I'm just going to use this image, which is a silly image. I used it to make brushes in Photoshop, but and so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to choose that same image trace. The default is going to give me this black and white, which doesn't really work for this. I'm going to go to Window, Image Trace, bring up that panel, and this time I'm going to go to the preset and go to, let's say, 3 colors. This is just going to pick like the 3 primary colors in the image, and it's going to apply those to all the different kind of like shadows and highlights. And so it becomes like this 3-color image. Still not as much detail as I'd like, so I can actually manually add the amount of colors that I want. So let's say I want like 10 colors, and we'll see what it comes up with. So it'll pick like the 10 like primary colors and add those to the image, and now it starts to kind of become a little bit closer to my original image. Those almost actually look a little bit like diamonds or crystals or whatever. So you can see that, like, you can imagine if you had a photograph of like a sunset or something like that. Something that's really cool though is like if you do have something like a sunset and you kind of want to, after you expand this, it's got this white background, but once we expand it, these are all individual shapes. So I can actually select this background with the white arrow, hit delete, and I'm actually left with all of my gemstones here. So let's say I wanted to change all these red bits to like yellow or something. So a cool thing that I haven't really shown you yet is I can select this area with my white arrow, and I can go to where it says select and same, and I can choose all these different things that might be similar. So in this case I would say fill color. So now what it's doing is it's choosing anything that's that fill color, and I can go in and I can change that color. So let's say I change it to yellow, like some weird yellow green, and I hit OK. And so now all the shapes that were that color I can change to this color. So you can see how this can be really helpful for silk screening if you have experience in that, or even just like taking an image of a sunset and kind of altering it. You could even take a portrait and alter it if you wanted to. So take your time and kind of check that out. But as far as like the exercise, I just want you to kind of create your own drawing and color it in and have fun with it. All right, I hope that this is helpful and you enjoy it, and I will talk to you later.